Whilst the Adeptus Astartes and the Astra Militarum are the most recognisable parts of the Imperial military, they are far from the only ones. Amongst the myriad forces there are some who are both renowned and mysterious in equal measure, and many of these lesser contingents are often geared to a specific task. Today, we shall explore what we know of one of these groups, their existence often suppressed by the Imperium due to the nature of their work and their unsettling abilities. They are tasked with the acquisition or destruction of all things sorcerous and psychic, often dealing with the most potent psychic threats known as alpha-level psykers. They are all but immune to the touch of the warp, having been selected and maybe trained so that their very presence is enough to unnerve even the hardiest of humans, whilst proving anathema to those who harness the immaterium. Though they seemingly all but disbanded following the Horus Heresy, they have returned in the modern age where their abilities prove invaluable in this warp-ravaged galaxy. Officially known as the Silent Sisterhood of the Great Tithe, supposedly the militant arm of the Divisio Astra Telepathica, but effectively under the Emperor's direct command in ancient times, they are most commonly referred to by those in the know as the Sisters of Silence. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. Every Sister of Silence, also known as a Null Maiden, is part of a mutant breed of humanity most commonly known as Blanks, or Untouchables to some in the Great Crusade. These mutants are physically identical to other humans as far as we know, but unlike everyone else, they have no connection to the warp whatsoever. They are, perhaps for want of a better word, soulless. Instead, their brains are capable of blocking the warp itself, projecting a subconscious aura that not only nullifies warp activity, but also severs the connection between a psyker and the immaterium. Standing in proximity to a blank causes a strange feeling of unease in all regular humans around them, though to psykers the effect is far more painful. Blanks are also immune to possession and chaotic corruption, making them invaluable agents. As well as the Silent Sisterhood, the Culexus Assassins are also blanks, and even the Eldar have blanks in the form of the Harlequin Solitaire. However, not all blanks are created equal, and the Sisters of Silence are the strongest of their kind. One assumes that powerful male blanks are passed to the Assassinorium or Inquisition, at least in modern times. It is also said by some that members of the Sisterhood are able to enhance their nullifying abilities through an unknown form of training, making them powerful enough to even disrupt the wire energy of the Orcs or the synaptic links of the Tyranid hive mind. Other than their genetic powers, the Sisters are also formidable warriors. It is unclear whether they are surgically or genetically enhanced in the same way as the Adeptus Astartes, but as some believe their bloodline is drawn from the techno-barbarians that once ruled Terra, and assumedly many other human worlds, it may be that they simply receive incredibly advanced training that make them faster than even the Space Marines. Said training starts young, as the Astra Telepathica would gather the strongest untouchable girls alongside their hunt for rogue psykers known as the Great Tithe. The final stage of the training is known as the Vow of Tranquility, a dedication to duty that takes the form of total silence for the rest of the Null Maiden's days, hence the name Sisters of Silence. The trainees are still permitted to speak, allowing them to function as intermediaries and translators when communication with others is necessary. Rather than speak, the Sisterhood uses an incredibly complex system of sign language, adaptable for use with technology and on the battlefield. They can also use the battle signs of the Space Marines, allowing them to better coordinate with Astartes' forces. They have almost absolute authority, able to call upon and then ditch other Imperial forces as part of their mission, and collateral damage is considered acceptable if necessary. This, combined with the fact that they were commonly associated with a group known as the Divisio Investigates, militant arm of the Astra Telepathica dedicated to combating psykers, suggests that the Silent Sisterhood was, in some ways at least, the forerunner to what would become the Inquisition. The origins of the Silent Sisterhood are almost a total mystery. According to some, these warrior women have always been around in some capacity, having formed perhaps during the Dark Age of technology or just being ever present at the side of the Emperor. Others point to an incident known as the Cataclysm of Pentacanase in the early Great Crusade, sometime before the return of Leman Russ, the first time that anything like the Sisters ever appeared, as being the catalyst for their origin. But others believe that the whole affair was an experiment to test the effectiveness of the Sisters against a psychic threat. Some sort of psychically induced madness swept through the heavily populated world, and though Astartes of the 6th Legion, the future Space Wolves, were en route, it was possible there would have been no world to save when they made it. Yet one force stood uncorrupted, not a single member of their ranks falling to the madness and corruption. Known to the locals as the Daughters of the Crow, These women were off-world warriors that were completely unaffected by the madness, and the commander of the Black Ship force sent to investigate the phenomena on Pentakineis took a gamble by delivering them into the heart of the storm. I need to stress here that Black Ships mentioned pretty much throughout are part of the Tactica and are not to be confused with the Inquisition vessels of the same name. The daughters fought and won out, still never succumbing, and whilst the 6th Legion was still needed to finally pacify the planet, these women had effectively turned the tide and saved the day. Not that the locals got to thank them, mind you, as they were spirited away by the Black Ships in the immediate aftermath, assumedly to become Sisters of Silence if they weren't already part of the Sisterhood. For those who wish to seek out the world they supposedly came from, it is listed as a planet known as 913, but no such place actually exists in the annals of Imperial history. Some claim that the world was robbed of huge numbers of its population after Pentakineis, suggesting both that the Sisterhood began there and that the Imperium adopted its own history. Probably not for the first time, and certainly not for the last, I hasten to add. Whether Pentakineis was truly the beginnings of the Order or simply a field test for it, engineered to gauge their abilities, the Silent Sisterhood was formed and placed under the remit of the Astra Telepathica, the overall organization responsible for astropaths, the Scholastica Psychana, and the Black Ships, though in some ways the Sisters were also under the personal command of the Emperor of Mankind himself. The reason I suspect this is the freedom they had. Not only did they have inquisitorial level authority before the Inquisition even existed, but they were the only military force aside from the Custodes permitted within the Emperor's personal domain, the inner Imperial Palace. Though they were undoubtedly busy across the battlefields of the Great Crusade, we know of very few confirmed instances when the Silent Sisterhood were called to war. Based out of the Somnus Citadel on Luna, which would also later become HQ for the Knights Errant, I assume that much of their work will have been like the Inquisition, in small numbers and in secret. In fact, the only Crusade-era engagement I could find for the Sisters came in the Battle of Iota Horlogi, where they reinforced Mortarion and the Death Guard against the Xenos known as Jorgal, whose offspring were believed to be psychic, even if the adults weren't. The Sisters themselves aided Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow and his 7th Great Company, as part of the final push into the hatcheries of the colony, where assumedly the psychic presence was most concentrated. They were led by Amandera Kendall, an Oblivion Knight, and thus one of the most powerful blanks within the Sisterhood, who would have received the null enhancement training if such a thing existed. Kendall, along with Garrow and the Acton crews of the Sons of Horus, would also be selected as one of the founding members for what would actually become the Inquisition by Malcador the Sigillite following the Astartes' flight from Istvan III. The most famous engagement and arguably the finest hour for the Sisters of Silence came on Prospero, home of the Thousand Suns Space Marine Legion, where the 3,000 or so Sisters deployed alongside the Custodes and Space Wolves proved invaluable in combating the prodigious abilities of Magnus the Red Suns. It is unclear if this force would have ever been able to shut Magnus down entirely, especially as the losses they suffered during the battle meant they couldn't even stop the Astartes fully. But without them, the Imperial death toll would have been even higher, and the results may even have changed. We just can't know. After this, potentially the entire Silent Sisterhood, or at least most of it, was committed to the war within the Webway, a battle against demons and traitors fought partially within the Imperial Palace itself as the Emperor's armies attempted to defend the damage caused by Magnus during his attempt to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal. Over the 5-year battle, 90% of the Adeptus Custodes perished, and massive numbers of Sisters fell too. But they proved instrumental in ending the war via the Black Ships, of which many of them are believed to have been commanders or at least crew. Gathering 1,000 captured Psykers, the Sisters sacrificed their souls, freeing up the Emperor from the Golden Throne for a single day to bring a decisive end to the battle and semi-permanently seal the rift below Terra. As long as the Lord of Mankind is on the throne and alive, it will remain sealed. The Sisterhood didn't seem to leave Terra after the war within the Webway ended, though they of course fought in the siege of the Imperial Palace, and we do know that more of them were scattered throughout the galaxy. That's not to say there weren't other battles in the heresy involving the Sisters, merely we just don't know of them, and if we did, we don't know what role the Sisters played within them. In the aftermath of the Horus heresy and the internment of the Emperor upon the Golden Throne, the Sisters of Silence seemed to find themselves without purpose. Their numbers were down, and those still alive were supposedly scattered throughout the galaxy. This didn't change them, or their role, however, and many continued their witch-hunting work regardless, but the Sisterhood essentially fragmented as a result and was all but forgotten by the Imperium. By M32 and the War of the Beast, only a single cohort around 50 strong was known to the Imperials in order to be drafted into the war effort. It took some convincing from the Lord Commander at the time, Chapter Master Corland of the Imperial Fists, but the Sisters were talked around to working with the Imperium again. They were still loyal to the Emperor, but had lost faith in what his empire had become, and originally were happy to see it burn. Other than that, one assumes that the surviving sisters did their best to live normal lives in human society, something not made easy by the discomfort their abilities can cause. Blanks are sometimes called pariahs, and this is why. Some supposedly were able to suppress said abilities, and enough were able to settle down and even raise a family, passing on their blank genetics to future generations. Following the War of the Beast, the Sisters of Silence pretty much fall off the map in terms of galactic history. Even though some did remain active initially, we do not know how many took up their mantle over the millennia. The Silent Sisterhood did not disband, however, that much at least we know, as evidenced in M41. Accompanying the Adeptus Custodes from Terra, a force of sisters arrived on Luna during the Terran Crusade, where they once again clashed with Magnus the Red as he sought to slay the reborn Robert Guilliman. They were not capable of suppressing the demon Primarch, but they disrupted him just enough to allow the 13th Primarch to defeat his brother and drive him back into the webway. Once he was restored as Lord Commander of the Imperium, Guilliman officially ordered the gathering of the Silent Sisterhood, which led to mass recruitment and expansion and a return of the Null Maidens to the front lines. They have proved critical in allowing the traversal of the galaxy in the aftermath of the appearance of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the titanic warp rift that currently divides the Imperium in two. With the aid of the navigator houses of the Navis Nobilite, the sisters have been able to forge paths through the massive and dangerous warp storms, and perhaps even through the Great Rift itself. We know the Indomitus Crusade reached Baal, which is on the far side of said rift, and it had to get there somehow, didn't it? As the Imperium and its inhabitants seem to encroach ever further on real space, making Psychers perhaps even more dangerous, I do not doubt that the Silent Sisterhood and the Astra Telepathica still have a large role to play in the fate of the Imperium. Though we know very few members of the Silent Sisterhood, at the time of the Horus Heresy, we do know their most senior commanders. The three highest ranks in the Sisterhood were, and presumably still are, the Nemesis Praxia, the Mistress of the Black Fleet, and the Knight Commander. The Nemesis Praxia was the overseer of the collected knowledge of the Sisterhood, and also oversaw the training of recruits. In the Horus Heresy, the woman in this role was called Eben Naroda, though we know nothing more about her. We also know very little of the Mistress of the Black Fleet, save her name, Veronica Sulath, but her role was effectively command of the fleets of the Divisio Investigates, including the black ships in their hunt for Psychers, which also meant she was in charge of gathering the Psychers for the war within the webway. The Knight Commander was actually the highest ranked sister of all, in command of all field operations. Her name was Genetia Kroll, known to many as the Soulless Queen of the Imperium, and her first known engagement came against Dark Eldar during the Great Crusade at an unknown location called the Mournful Gate, where she took command following a spate of assassinations and carried the day. She was of course present on Prospero, killing many of the best of the Thousand Sons in single combat and marshalling her force's protective auras effectively. She also slew the demon that had been attempting to manipulate the human Caspar Hauser, as it revealed to all present that the burning of Prospero was designed to wipe out both the Thousand Sons and Space Wolves in one go. Kroll then returned to Terra and fought extensively in the War in the Webway, in joint command of the Imperial forces as they defended Kalastar, an ancient Eldar city within the Webway near which Magnus had caused damage to the labyrinthine dimension. Though she did survive the full 5 years, she lost half the fingers on her left hand as part of the final retreat to the Imperial Palace. What role she played in the Siege of Terra is unknown, as is her eventual fate post-heresy, but I suspect she was one of the sisters who remained on active part of the Astra Telepathica rather than disappear or retire. In modern times, we don't know the individuals who fill these three prestigious positions, nor exactly do we know of their standing relative to newer organisations like the Inquisition that in a way succeeded them. But with their newfound unity and activity and the issues of the Great Rift cutting off black ships, I do not doubt that they are all kept particularly busy. So ends the tale of the Sisters of Silence. The Null Maidens are impressive indeed, even without any modifications they may or may not have received, and without them, I do not doubt that the psychic threats to the Imperium would have cost much more to suppress, not to mention the now critical hunt of the black ships that keep the Emperor alive upon the Golden Throne. Pity any Psyker unfortunate enough to cross the path of the Silent Sisterhood. Whilst they will not speak or emit a single sound, their very presence is a nightmare, and their combat prowess is legendary. For now though, it is time to move on. Next time will be the penultimate part of the Legion's mini-series, and given there's only 2 left on the table, these last adventures would be enough of a hint as to our next destination. This Legion was led by an astute but potentially naive Primarch in a way, and though they are now thralls of chaos, their fall is one of the more tragic tales of the Horus Heresy. Thank you all for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.